Welcome to the Prompt Lab, how to write the best prompts. Today with me, since I will be hosting, Soraya is traveling, so I will try to be the best host that I can be for you and facilitate through the session as well. Little word about us. We are Aiku, dedicated to design, prototype, develop custom AI software. We do anything from trainings to workshops to building AI and truly trying to make the magic happen. So the Prompt Lab is a series of 5 online sessions. We are here at the 5th online session. What's so special about it? We want it to be as inclusive and accessible as possible, should be free, should be flexible, should be interactive. Drop your questions anytime you want, raise your hand, share your audio. So as mentioned, this is the 5th of 5 sessions. Today we are a little bit of a, let's say, specific deep dive, and we will talk about system prompts, attached sources, or prompting with external files. Deep research will be a topic, but there will be more. There will be tool use, there will be agents. It will be quite interesting. If you want to stay in touch, that's the link to the Aiku community WhatsApp group. We have more things coming up in the upcoming weeks, and it will be more hands-on even with use cases that we will demonstrate. Gonna be fun, don't miss out. Now let's dive into today's topic. What we currently see and it's been a trend in the not only past months, but even in the last 2 or 3 years, that starting from simple prompts and simple chat applications, the systems that we have seen have taken steps to become more complex, and systems have grown to be increasingly complex, actually packed with new features. It all started with, hey, can my ChatGPT be a custom version? I want to have like a special assistant, and can you somehow customize it? People figure that out with system prompts. Can we not only rely on the information of this large language model, but have it extended with, let's say, researching the internet? Web search was there, and then that was even extended by deep research. Then the idea came along with chatting with my own data. So can I load my knowledge base into that? And this is the knowledge that it's grounded on and it doesn't hallucinate. RAG came into being, but it didn't stop there. As we all know, we have baked more functionality into it and tool use in order to not only rely on probabilistic functionality, but also to deterministically make them do something for us, where we just rely on specific functionality in that regard. Now we make systems interact, and we want, through APIs or through a structured output, make sure that our large language models have a reliable interaction with other systems or amongst each other. And on top of everything, we allow large language models in an agentic setup that they act with more autonomy. And that, of course, raises a follow-up question, and that is, in the context of prompting, how do we need to adapt our prompts to these particular use cases or applications? And this is what today's session will be about. We will dive into each context, actually every context other than the simple prompts. And we will look into how prompts are being set up here. What are some of the structural components? What are the things that can be done right? We will see a ton of examples that showcase what one can do. So let's make the start. and we will look into system prompts for more complex applications. So we have just seen it in the overview. This all emerged from the idea that we want to have more specific to a given use case behavior of a model so that it should adhere to some constraints or persona definitions when being interacted with. The big providers have come up quickly with, be it OpenAI, GPTs, Google has their GEMs, Anthropic also has something similar for that, and others, here I've marked it with the X, do that too. That goes beyond the very simple prompt of, hey, you are a helpful assistant. We want to establish some parameters, rules, guidelines, whatever it may be, so that the general assistant becomes a more custom assistant. This is the larger idea that we're looking at, and you might have tried it yourself. You might have used some prepared GPTs or GEMs, have created your own, and this is what it is about. Now, let's look into one of these system prompts that you need to set up in order to make this work out. So a system prompt, to make that clear, is something that you wire into the assistant before you even start the first chat interaction. That's why it's called system prompt. It's not a user prompt. It's defined before the chat starts. There is a great GitHub repository that I have as a link here called Awesome AI System Prompts, where there are a ton of exemplary system prompts. And I have taken one, which is an OpenAI 4.0 system prompt. Again, this is exemplary. It's in most of the cases, the system prompts that they showcase there are not the actual system prompts, but you get an idea how a system prompt could be set up so that you could do it yourself in a given setup. Let's read into it and make up our mind about what we actually find here. So the first thing that is defined at the beginning is you are ChatGPT, a large language model trained by OpenAI. This marks the role or scope. It's like a structural component that we usually see. Then there is some more contextual information, knowledge cutoff, what's the current date, some capabilities that it has, and then it even has a persona idea. So there's a personality definition here, personality version 2 here. Upcoming is something that allows for, let's say, setting of a style or a more consistent tone. And it reads like this. Over the course of the conversation, you adapt the user's tone and preference. Try to match the user's vibe, tone, and generally how they are speaking. You want the conversation to feel natural. You engage in authentic conversations by responding to the information provided, asking relevant questions, showing genuine interest, curiosity. If natural, continue the conversation with casual conversation. That is something that is just, let's say, a basic setup. And here it continues with something that goes on top. And it is a description on tools. And this is something that you might know from using ChatGPT that it has some functionality that goes beyond chatting. And here you can see that in the system prompt, they define as a description at first, what are these tools? So there is the first tool, which is bio, and then the bio tool is described. The bio tool allows you to persist information across conversations, address your message, and write whatever information you want to remember. The information will, and so on and so on. The original system prompt, because I have copied it from the repository, is longer. So there is a lot more description to the tool itself. Also here with the Python tool, the web tool, image gen, then Canmore, which is the canvas tool that allows you to create these text document-like canvases. So even with, this is maybe notable, with Canmore there are different functionalities. So for each functionality, they highlight like what it can do. And at the end, they also have one section that gives a little bit of guardrails, and it says, never use this function. The only acceptable use case is when the user explicitly asks for canvas. Sits a little bit in the tool definition. All right, that if you have never seen a system prompt, it is a little bit, uncommon, I would say, at least, because you have seen with what I've done with the dot dot dot, they tend to be quite long, because the ramp up or the setup of an custom AI assistant, I mean, it can just be quite complex. But what is it that we could potentially have here? Multiple components can go into it. Some of these we have already seen. I want to go through them, giving you examples, because I think other than giving you definitions, today I want to show you more examples. At first, there's the category of operational parameters and constraints. The role is the first one, very, very simple. You could imagine like you're an enthusiastic biology teacher named Thomas. That's just a role. Then topic and expertise limits, quite common as well, to have a little better control over how the system is supposed to behave. The example reads, if a user asks about topics outside your expertise, such as medical advice or legal matters, inform that you are not qualified to provide relevant responses. Suggest that they should consult with the appropriate professionals. And I think this is something that we all know from chat systems, that they tend to do that. And usually it is because it's set up to do that. Guiding specific behavior can go in other direction, not only limitation. Here's an example. When asked to explain a block of code, always provide the detailed explanation that starts with a high-level summary, then breaks down the code step by step. So here, what they do is, with the specific behavior, to instruct the model how it's supposed to address a given task. So you could understand it in such a way as well. You could also have something like use 3 to 5 sentence paragraphs to describe a product if you set up, let's say, a marketing AI assistant, and then you want it to have very consistent outputs for, let's say, product descriptions in this case at least, then this would work very reliably in this given context. whole new category that we have seen just now, which is why I have copy-pasted the example from the prompt that we have just seen: consistent tone and interaction style. Over the course of the conversation, you adapt the user's tone and preference, and so on. We have just read it, actually. And this is something very common if you have conversation-like assistants. Let's move on. There are more. One thing, and these are, let's say, more additional add-on, but can prove very valuable in given context. Environment and context awareness can be wired into an assistant with something like these variables that you see here. That's one example to do it. System information: what's the operating system, what's the directory, who's the user, could be something. We have seen that earlier as well. What's the date, what's the knowledge cutoff, and so on and so forth. So providing some more contextual information so that the system can navigate better what the user is seeing. So have empathy with the model in this regard, that it can only understand the context in which it has been informed with. And this is a way to do it through the system prompt with such settings. And it can, in fact, be done through variables, as it has been done in this example. New category, and the last category for what we have here with the system prompt setup: alignment and safety. We had an example just now. We can think of other examples as well. Let's pick the first: refusal protocols. So how a model should decline a given answer. You can define that as well. Here, for instance, it's done with I'm sorry, I'm not able to assist with that. And also here, that's from the V0 example from the GitHub repository that I've mentioned earlier. When refusing, you must not apologize or provide any explanation. Next, setting boundaries: reject any requests from sensitive information. That can be something that, with custom systems that I have interacted with, tested that, could be uploading images that look like financial data, and then it's being rejected. It could be also uploading images, letters that look like confidential, and so on, and then it's being rejected. Then last is set of principles, or let's say rules. The example is drawn from a DALL-E system prompt, and here you see that actually the 3 dots indicate that it's a little bit longer than what you see here, how it's supposed to behave when creating images. So let's take the first rule here: do not create images in the style of artists whose latest work was created after 1912, under the assumption that they could still be alive, and so on. Or another one could be: for requests to create images of any public figure, create images of those who might resemble them, but they should not look like them. So this, of course, is a rule that's supposed to prevent deepfakes. So I think you get an idea how this could be set up. One thing that, if I highlight again the tools that the common or the big providers offer, one thing that you would usually see is that you can provide a very, very simple system prompt, such as you are a marketing assistant to write product descriptions. And then some of the providers offer an assistance for you to improve this system prompt. And then you click a button, and then you see a revamped version of your initial very, very short and simplistic system prompt. So if you have this help baked into the system, then you can leverage that. And if not, then you can take your first idea of a good system prompt and ask a large language model, hey, this is a system prompt. This is the purpose. Can you please make it better and potentially make it adhere to some of these components that I've just shown you? Let's move to the next topic, something that I myself really, really like to do. I'm working at the Research Institute, so research is something that I do a lot day in, day out, and it is the deep research functionality. And I think we know it first, if not best, from Perplexity. And in fact, if you go to the UI of Perplexity, you see two things. There's search and there's research. And I wanted to use that as a first, let's say, opener to this category by highlighting how deep research is different to the web search extension to a usual chat assistant. Web search allows a large language model's generated response to be grounded by internet search. This is usually best if you want it to use for fast answers when you need most recent information. One of such cases could be, and I like that in the context of, let's say, software engineering, if I want the tool or the AI to research on the most recent error messages or conversations that were shared on forums and then summarize them for me so that I don't have to Google myself through it and get a suggestion how to solve a tough challenge that I see in a way how people have recently tackled it. That can be pretty cool and a true differentiator to just using simple code assistance, for instance. Deep research in this regard is different. It's not just your large language model generating a response with the help of some internet researched information. It actually is an agentic capability that follows through a multi-step research, and it still is grounded by the internet, but it usually takes a lot more sources into account. And this is why it is more usable for advanced analysis on any topic. It's not uncommon that for a research query, you have more than 100 internet search sources that go into the answer. What could be some examples? Again, I think it's always good to be inspired first by some examples. So I have brought a few. Academic literature review is quite common for researchers. So how could that look like? Here's a simple example. So conduct a deep research on techniques to improve the efficiency of transformer-based neural networks. Focus on methods for reducing computational cost or speeding up inference. Provide a comprehensive report summarizing major approaches, key papers, and their results. And there's also a time frame given. Cite relevant research work for each approach. So you can already tell that this example at first has an expectation on the output. There is an expectation on what sources are to be used and how it is supposed to do parts of the task as well, cite relevant research work for each approach as well. There's a little bit of a, let's say, structural pattern that we will uncover in a bit. Let's have a second example opened, and we can maybe go about the evidence-based fact checks. So it's a simple example again. Fact check the following claim: drinking green tea increases lifespan by 10 years. Use deep research to find any scientific studies or reliable statistics that support or refute this claim. There's something I want to highlight right away, because here it directly addresses the tool, use deep research. That can sometimes be valuable if you have an AI system that allows you to do many things, web search as well as deep research as well as other things. If you then call out the tool specifically, it can have the benefit to direct the model to explicitly know what you're expecting it to do. Let's follow on how this continues. Provide a report, again, the output expectation, detailing the evidence for or against it. Include at least 2 to 3 sources for each side if available. Finally, give a conclusion on whether the claim is substantiated by the evidence. That is quite well structured already. The other ones as well, we have another example on comparative analysis, and then it's a research proposal as well. There are some patterns that I want to show to you in a moment, but there is one more thing that I would want to do in between, and it is to highlight how deep research and reasoning models go along very well. And it is something that OpenAI highlighted when they introduced their deep research features. One thing that deep research, when it creates responses, does differently to normal models, large language models that do not reason, is that they don't need to be instructed to follow a multi-step research workflow. With an out-of-the-box language model that does not do reasoning or thinking, as it's also sometimes called, you would need to instruct the model to force a stepwise answer. So usually you have seen that with our last sessions. Think step by step could be an approach to do that, or first analyze the problem, second consider options, third give a conclusion. This is limited and does usually not allow a very profound response. With reasoning models, this process of following through a complex query that needs to be broken down into multiple subtasks happens automatically. It's built in. So therefore, you can rely on the model to autonomously break it down and then follow through it in a way that it then, without being explicitly mentioned step by step, follows like an internal monologue as it goes through the sources. When introducing this deep research functionality, OpenAI also showcased how this can look differently. So here they have an example researching on protein sequences. They showcased how this can look if you have a model that does not do deep research and a model that does do deep research. And one of the most notable things that I wanted to highlight is that because we cannot go through the entire prompt, it's just way too much text. But on the website that I have linked here and that they have published, introducing deep research, it's called. They show it also providing statistics to it, how it can improve results and so on. But one notable thing that you usually see is that sources are being cited, that the overall output has more length, breadth, but also that it can uncover a research topic domain-specific inquiries with just a lot more critical detail. And therefore, it is so interesting when analyzing a given specific domain. Now, what are some of the structural components? What could you use when prompting for deep research? Now, one thing that I can highlight is, since you have a reasoning model involved, a slightly worse prompt, let's say, could be made up by the thinking of the system and by asking you as a user back. This is what some systems do, that they ask back how they have understood your research task. And then you can edit the research inquiry before it goes off and does the research, which can take between 15 to many more minutes. I don't know. I've never really waited for as long as that, but some model providers say it can take up to 30 minutes, which is not something that I have experienced, but therefore you have some control in that regard. But at first, being explicit really counts. Here's a bad example: research climate change. Doesn't make sense at all. It lacks of specificity a lot. But if you analyze the impact of rising sea levels on coastal communities in Southeast Asia over the next 30 years, focusing on economic disruption and adoption strategies, then that is a lot more specific and you can expect way better results. Also, provide context and background. What do you need that for? Technical literature review, academic research paper, we have seen that. Then most of us are somehow in a professional job, so business strategy report. You can provide that as well. Breaking down the task for more complex questions, or let the AI do it. As I've just mentioned, reasoning models do it inherently. So in that regard, you don't need to do it with most of the tools, but step by step is usually the chain of thought trigger sentence, as you already know. Let's move to the other side, because yes, of course, there are more things. One thing that is quite interesting, and I think you should always think of that, is the output formatting and structure. So what do you expect the output to capture? It can, here I have the structured report, list of pros and cons, comparison table, literature review. It can be multiple. It can also be sections of a given report. So I want you to have an introduction here. I want you to have an overview, a synthesis. You can be very clear on that, and then it will usually follow through quite neatly. Another thing that I can highlight is how it's supposed to handle the sources. So here, synthesize findings across the identified sources or compare different viewpoints across the sources. Totally different thing, right? Prioritize peer-reviewed articles, or you can also say focus on recent data. This is what I usually do when I want to have the most recent, let's say, technological developments in AI in my research context, because everything happens just way too quickly and you want to have the most recent data. Then type of analysis goes into the direction of output expectation. Let's say identify trends, so trend analysis, or conduct a SWOT analysis, very, very simple one. All right, now the next category, it is prompting with external knowledge or RAG systems. So what is this about? Usually the idea of, hey, I want to chat with my own data usually comes from organizational context. Companies want to do that a lot. So this is why I have taken a screenshot here of actually my own co-pilot from organizational context. The whole idea here is that we allow a large language model the capability to connect to external knowledge sources. So we don't only rely on the training data that it has seen, but then and mostly you all know that it is because of hallucination issues. We want it to address a specific data set or many sets of data to draw its knowledge from there. How could that look like when prompting for it? Yeah, that can actually be quite interesting. The first thing that you want to do usually is to have a more contextual setup here and to guide it in terms of what information to use. So the classics are here: answer the user's question using the document text above. Above is actually something that comes in the next prompt again, based solely on the information given in the context above. Answer the following question. Use the following pieces of retrieved context to answer the question. How information can be structured here is something that I will show in just in a moment with the prompt structure. But usually, if you just have an interface, you don't need to bother about that. I've just had the example of Copilot. You upload or you identify which documents it's supposed to work with, and then it's attached to the prompt, whereas it would first read and retrieve from the context, then attach it to your query, and then generate the answer from that. The prompt structure is only relevant if you want to paste some information right into the prompt, but I will show you in a moment. Something that can be interesting if you set up a prompt that's supposed to reliably work on this is to address the I don't know situation, so insufficient context. So here, one way to do that would be, if the information isn't available in the context to formulate an answer, simply reply with no answer. Or if the materials are not relevant or complete enough to confidentially answer, your best response is the materials do not appear to be sufficient. In this regard, you can allow at least a way out for when it's not really confident, though it may happen to you that you would find models to be overly confident on retrieving data that it's perceiving to be relevant. This is a caveat that I want to give out at this point of, I think. One thing that can be a little more interesting is if you have two documents and they are conflicting in terms of the information that they carry. Note the discrepancy, cite both sources, suggest consultation path. So this is something that can be very interesting if you want to compare things, or if you go beyond the stage of like, I don't have enough information, or I need to check what information quality I actually have. Then another structural component can be what origin the context is from. Give that as an additional context piece. These are excerpts from internal support documents, or here are relevant sections from legal statuses. Prompt structure. I've already talked about it. That's what most of the model providers say to read it from them, is that you should structure your prompt as it's getting longer and more complex. In the case of working with more context information, this can look as this. So here we have the markdown tags with context, and then the context is stated, and then we have the question stated out. It can be XML tags in a similar setup, but data and context always comes first, and then the task. So this is also, as we have seen earlier with the example, given the information above, answer the following question. The most minimalistic way to structure it probably is just by this separator dash. Usually you would work with tags. Then Citing sources can be quite interesting as well. So instruct the model to explicitly cite what sources it has used, just the overarching idea. Here's an example. When referencing information from a source, cite the appropriate source using their corresponding numbers. Every answer should include at least one source citation. This can be really, really valuable if you want to enhance transparency, explainability as well, and traceability to be able to easier monitor what this wondrous machine is doing. It cracks open this black box issue that we usually have with AI from the user perspective. Tool use. This is really something that has emerged in the last months only, and the example that I've taken is from the Google AI Studio, which in itself is not very old. Here, what you can do is, well, you can set in your conversation. So there's like a chat interface that you have here in the middle, and then on the right hand side you can choose the model that you want to use and set temperature and whatnot. But then you have this other functionality that's called tools. And with the tools or tool use, you can allow a large language model to go beyond just text generation or probabilistic capabilities where it generates words for you, but it can actually do actions that are more deterministic or go beyond that in general. Let's say it could be retrieving some data for you. With Google, it is here they also have the grounding with Google search, so the web search or internet search capability that we know from that we have just seen with Perplexity as well, or OpenAI has it as well. But it can also be executing code. So here there's a code execution where you can have Python executed. We have seen that in the system prompt earlier. Interacting with APIs to complete a task. It can be so much, in fact. When tool use is being set up, it's usually set up in a way that you would need to wire it into the system prompt. In that regard, it's a little more complex again. So maybe you recall the visual that I've shown in the beginning. It's a gradual step up in terms of sophistication, but also how complex the systems can be. You still recall that the tools were clearly defined. Usually you would also provide something like a parameter description. So what parameters can a tool or a function take? Also, we have seen that with the alignment and policy definitions earlier. Force guiding tool choice. So use the get weather tool to retrieve the most recent weather of the day, or use the tool grounding with Google search too. So that you can actually do from a user perspective as well. I usually, when I use the Google AI Studio, for instance, and I want it to use the grounding or internet search feature, I would in the prompt write, use the tool grounding with Google search to, I don't know, retrieve the most recent data on error messages on the internet and focus on 2025, something like that. Then there can be even more system prompt guidance in tool use. This now explicitly goes to the system prompt, such as ask for clarification if a user request is ambiguous, never refer to tool names when speaking to the user, only use a specific tool for a specific task can be another thing. Also, tool use sequence can be defined, such as always use tools in the following order. So you use tool A for the task X, then you use tool B for task Y, and then you use tool C for task Z. So that can be defined as well. Also, another thing that can be defined is parallel calls. So if you want to use multiple tools at the same time, but this is also something that you would need to set up in the back. Not all platforms allow for that, which is why I have like a very, very short feature comparison across the major platforms, what tools you can use and or how you can use them, let's say. And parallel calling is something that you can, for instance, with the big ones, do all across. One thing that to be highlighted is, let's say on the prompting nodes, the system prompt usually it's highlighted that it should carry the descriptions of what a tool is for. So OpenAI, for instance, they say it's useful for the system prompt to carry the information for when to call a tool and a description of how it is used or what it is for. Also, Google highlights that the descriptions for tools are crucial. Anthropic does a similar thing to you. Function calling is in the same context, goes a little bit deeper. Usually, this is something that you would set up as a developer in the back. It's not open to the usual user unless it's a low code environment. So in fact, in a low code style of doing it, you can do it in the Google AI Studio as well. But I think that's sort of the intersection between a developer and a low code environment, the Google AI Studio. So usually, this is an example that I've taken from the OpenAI documentation on that. Usually the flow is that you would need to define the tools. Defining tools looks like we see it here in this text, usually JSON style of format, where you clearly define what's the name of the tool, what functionality does it have, and so on. Then you call the model, and then what the model does is to generate for the new call. So this one is an example that where the user pings the model and asks, can you send emails to addresses here saying hi? The tool that has been defined beforehand is the send email tool or the function. Here you can see it. So then what the model does next is to interpret that and to then generate the arguments for the function call. Here you can see it's type function, send email, and then it creates the arguments. So to which email does it go, what is the subject, and what's the body. So this is how, from a developer perspective, you would set it up. Generating structured output is something that I wanted to drop here. We have talked about it in the last session. I wanted to reiterate it because it is, I think, the level up when it comes to allowing large language models to use and interact with applications downstream goes a little bit further to tool use because you can actually connect systems here by structuring the output. The way how it is possible to set it up, we have mentioned it last time, so I will just very briefly say you can either put it in the directly into the prompt. You can use the tool calling as we have seen it just now. You can define the functions, or you can use the so-called JSON mode that is sometimes also available as a tool. That was the example that we looked at last time. I think that's just a reminder for you to go to the last video if you wanted to refresh that. This is how we already arrive at the last category. And that's probably the one that is currently attracting the most buzz, agents, and how to guide agents and how to make them fulfill autonomous tasks. The example that I've taken is Manus because, well, it was, let's say, one of the more recent kids on the block and had a lot of eyeballs drawn to it. What's special about agents is that it's a significant step beyond just a single interaction that you have with a large language model, but it can do more. It can plan, execute multiple steps or tasks, can use tools, it has memory, potentially it operates with autonomy. Yeah, well, when prompting these agents, it's actually more of setting up an operational framework and a quote unquote cognitive architecture than just prompting into it simply. So this is more looking at it from the backdrop, let's say. What's sitting behind it as a method is the REACT, so reasoning and acting, prompting framework, which we have already looked at in the session when we talked about more advanced prompting techniques. And you recall how it was set up. So there was a thought first, then the action, then from the action, the observation, try to make sense and reflect what information or what was played back from the action. And then it triggers the next action, basically, as we have learned the last time. What could be some core components here in the prompt, as you could potentially also define it, or things that you can consider when setting up an agent? Role and goal is the most common and should be quite central to guide at least what specific expertise an agent should have. Setting this up can be similar to how we have seen it in the system prompt and the prompt components as we discussed them in our very basic sessions. Then planning and task decomposition, chain of thought, we already know it. Tool use, so what tools are available here is again crucial. An addition that can be made, it depends on how you want to set it up or how it is set up, is how to handle errors and how an unexpected situation is to be coped with. This can improve performance dramatically, but it relies on a good strategy how to resolve unexpected situations or errors. Memory management, short term, just a recent conversation. Long term, does it have access to external knowledge potentially? Lastly, something that you can consider is whether it should follow a given structured interaction protocol, such as the model context protocol that Anthropic has made so popular. I think the major takeaway from this is guiding autonomous agents typically involves prompting strategies that address a lot of components, and it can quickly disappoint those who imagine this to be very, very simple. All right, and this brings us to the wrap up already. It is a point that I want to highlight to potentially even wrap up the entire Prompt Lab series. And it is that it's getting, if you want to take prompting, let's say, seriously, there is an evolution towards prompting being very, very programmatic or systematic, that you also see a convergence of multiple features that multimodal models can manage simultaneously, or that are being set up in a way that you as a user can use from the interface. Though what appears so simple on the interface, there's a lot of work in the back, as you have seen with the system prompts today, with the tools, the tool use, and guiding autonomous behavior. And that would also conclude our prompt lab. We have had 5 sessions, of which I, of course, encourage you to go to the YouTube link and look them up again. We also want to go through another effort of putting the information on our webpage so that it's easier to read it up again, so that our online resources have not only the quality of the video, but there's also some other representation of it. And therefore, we might also have another run at the Prompt Lab somewhere later this year. We shall see. Hope you enjoyed it. Always leave your feedback with either Soraya or myself so that we can continue improving this. And what would be also great for us to know is what other topics might be of interest to you. One thing that we are considering is a little series on agents or agentic AI, how to set it up, different notions of it, as well as RAG systems and all of that, potentially working with particular frameworks, LangChain, and so on. So if there is something that you would have a particular interest in, then let us know. We will probably then in the course of the summer come up with something. The next thing that we will for sure do is, and it will start on the 13th of May, so let's say around about 2 weeks, is a series with use cases, sales, marketing, service, data analytics, software engineering, where we will showcase prototypes of how we would address some of the most common use cases with AI. I think this would be it for the moment. Hope you enjoyed. We'll see you later or soon, or read from you in either email, WhatsApp, and so on. So cheers. Bye-bye.